So even less than a decade ago, the issue with the digital divide was access. Today we're finding that even though that still exists, especially among low-income families with students who are, for instance, who've come from overseas, refugees, those sorts of students who are typically ELL students. Even though that still exists in some places, by and large, the initial conception or concern about the digital divide is at least reduced, if not gone. Our students have all students have access somewhere, whether it's at school or at the library or at home, and so the access issue is greatly diminished. And also studies have recently shown that even among low-income students, there is a very high level of ownership of devices, whether it's a laptop or a home computer or a cell phone with internet connection. And in fact, the survey data that's coming back on cell phone or smartphone ownership is rather high among low-income families, and one of the reasons for that is you end up with a need to have a phone, and rather than have a home phone and a cell phone and a computer and internet access, you can have all that stuff in one device for one fee rather than a whole bunch of fees. So we see low-income families with a higher percentage of mobile technologies than we would normally think would be, mostly because that one device serves a whole bunch of different needs. So the access issue isn't as pronounced as it once was, but there still seems to be a gap, and what the production gap really is an indication that lower income families or kids from lower income families are not participating in this content production that Web 2.0 offers at the same rate as students from people from more affluent class groups. So this is where pedagogy comes into this conversation. So if Trotter is right, and in his observation that students from more wealthy school districts are being taught with these more authentic or project-based or hands-on types of approaches, and students from lower income schools are disproportionately being taught through rote learning, drill skill practices, memorization, and emphasizing those sorts of facets of learning as opposed to content production, then this is really a concern about pedagogy as well as access. So the new digital divide, the production gap, is a gap in the use of how these tools are used. And if we look at the power of these tools, for instance, look at the power of the tools for the last presidential election. The power of social media to mobilize young people behind a candidate. Barack Obama was largely nominated and elected from a huge groundswell of young voters who organized through social networks, and the vast majority of his campaign contributions were small contributions from people who had connected to the campaign through that network. So it's fairly clear that in order to have a voice in the present and for the foreseeable future, that it is important for people of all social classes to have have the access to and the know-how of how to manipulate and produce content and publish it in this space. So this bears a couple more questions. So how does pedagogy and school policy contribute to the production gap? And what long-term impact does this have for our students, our communities, and society? So if we are devoted to issues of equality and access for all, and opportunity for all, how can that opportunity be equal if students are not given equal opportunity to produce content or access the tools that will give them the power they'll need in the future to create change. Another interesting issue that I don't have a slide here for, that as Craig Watkins brings up, is the idea of social capital. So, for instance, even if we made everything equal, pedagogy and access, we would still be unequal in that students from more affluent groups or white-collar communities tend to have parents that are already engaged in networking practices, so they can bring their networking knowledge from work to help guide their students in their own online interactions, whereas students from more working class families tend to have parents who are not engaged in these spaces, and so there's definitely a social capital that exists in an inequitable fashion, or is distributed very unevenly, so to the point where you could have a wealthy school or a school in an affluent community with very tight restrictions on their technology use, and they would still probably be, or may still be, at an advantage over a lower income school with wide open access to these tools. So there's just a few other thoughts to consider there when in talking about equity in technology and education. So this brought me this concept of the production gap has led me to wonder, does the production gap exist in Minnesota? And knowing our record here on the achievement gap, the likely indicator would be that if a production gap exists here, it probably exists everywhere. And so I don't have any definitive answer for this, but I have some indicators. Recently, a survey was sent out to teachers in districts that received an EdTech Air grant through the Recovery Act, asking them about their and their students' technology use. And one of the questions on that survey was asking what percentage of students engage in production of multimedia digital content. And so I just pulled this one question, and I was only interested in the percentage of teachers who reported never engaging. So we have here on the left 0 to 70%. So the higher you go up in this on this chart, the fewer students are engaged in content production. And then I compared that to the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch as taken from the Minnesota State or Department of Education website. And so the further to the left you are on this chart, the fewer students you have on free and reduced lunch. The further you are on the right, the higher you are. And why I say this isn't a real definitive study here is because this was limited to schools that received this grant, and to receive this grant you had to qualify, and part of that qualification was you had to have a certain percentage of students on free and reduced lunch. So we've already eliminated our most affluent communities, and also to have a fair and decent group of teachers to pull from for the study. I only took the schools that involved that had the largest number of respondents to the survey. So we did have schools that had 3 or 4 teachers respond to the survey, and I felt that data probably would not be accurate, and it would give an inaccurate picture to weight the dots on the chart for those districts with dots that indicated or that represented numbers in the hundreds. So of these, with the exception of Brooklyn Center and Minneapolis, you can draw a fairly decent line here that shows, with the exception of those 2 outliers, that there may actually be a pretty strong correlation between the percentage of students on free and reduced lunch in a school district and their opportunity or their activity in producing digital content. And so so we have the wealthier school district on this chart is Osseo. They're also pretty close to being. They're also one of the top 2 in fewest number of teachers reporting their students never engage in this, whereas our 2 poor schools, or schools from poorer communities, St. Paul and Columbia Heights, also show that they have the most teachers reporting their students never engage in multimedia content production. So there does appear to be a strong indicator here that there might be some strong truth to this production gap issue. And but we can't be sure. We need more time devoted to studying this, and I believe it's a very important and quite frankly a pressing issue that we need to devote some energy to discovering. And really, I also believe the answer to this will also raise some questions about some of our other measures for measuring the achievement gap and what effects they have on our schools. That we may end up finding that for instance the standardized testing movement and what that ends up encouraging teachers and school districts and schools to do to raise their MCLB scores actually has a negative impact on whatever measure we can come up with for measuring the level of the achievement gap in their school, or the production gap in their school. So one question that comes up with this naturally is, so how might you engage your students as information prosumers? And in my presentation, I gave a number of ideas, and so I will just put links to these. These are projects that I've been involved with in the last few years that involve students in content production and publishing content online. And really, I believe that is the key, is engaging students in learning experiences that will place them in positions where they are producing content and publishing it. Thank you.